We are counting down the 10 most beautiful gains shaped by the Civil Rights era, each revealed through rare, powerful images. From music that mobilized marches to communities built on faith, family, and enterprise, these moments showcase pride, artistry, and resilience, forged under pressure. Some entries may challenge what you thought you knew about Black history's hidden strengths. Which achievement deserves the top spot? Let's begin with number 10. Every major movement needs fuel, and for the Civil Rights era, much of that energy came from the stage. In Harlem, the Apollo Theater drew crowds from across the city, its marquee shining over 125th Street as singers, comedians, and jazz bands filled the air with sound. These were not just shows, they were gatherings where community met culture and where tickets bought more than a night's entertainment. On benefit nights, the Apollo and venues like the Howard Theater in Washington, D.C. transformed into engines for the freedom struggle. Packed houses cheered the SNCC Freedom Singers and local R&B stars, passing the bucket for bail funds and voter registration drives. A single concert could raise hundreds, sometimes over $1,000, real money, when a field organizer might earn just $10 a week. Behind the curtain, these theaters kept dozens of Black workers on payroll, ushers, stagehands, musicians, and managers, all part of a neighborhood economy that thrived on show nights. Oral histories and surviving ledgers point to dozens of civil rights benefit events at the Apollo and Howard between the 1950s and the late 1960s, each one channeling cash and morale into the movement. Jazz clubs, church halls, and union auditoriums joined in too, as touring groups like the Freedom Singers turned music into steady support for campaigns across the country. The stage became a platform for organizing, a source of jobs, and a rallying point for hope. In the photos, you see not just the performers, but the pride in the crowd, their Sunday suits, their laughter, their sense of purpose. The beauty of Black Flag performance culture was more than music, it was a lifeline for justice. In Harlem studios during the early and mid-20th century, James Van Der Zee created portraits that stand as quiet declarations of dignity. Families arrived in tailored suits and dresses, children in pressed collars, elders with polished shoes and gloves, each pose a deliberate answer to the world outside. These images, preserved in the Schomburg Center's archives, reject the caricatures that filled white-owned newspapers. Instead, they present Black beauty as fact, showing wedding parties with crisp white gloves, fraternal orders in regalia, and mothers and daughters in flowing gowns. On Sundays, church doors opened to a parade of style. Across cities like Atlanta, Chicago, and Detroit, men in fedoras and women in feathered hats filled the streets after service. The tradition of Sunday best was more than fashion, and it was a public claim to respect and belonging, especially in places that denied both. Johnson Publishing's Ebony and Jet magazines spread these images nationwide, their pages filled with fashion spreads and street shots that reached millions of Black households. At their peak, Ebony and Jet together circulated to over 2 million readers, making them arbiters of style and aspiration. Behind every sharp suit and carefully chosen dress was a network of Black-owned tailor shops, dressmakers, and beauty salons. Oral histories from Harlem describe seamstresses who sourced fabric through word of mouth, and tailors who built micro-businesses despite being shut out of white-run supply chains. For many, the act of dressing well became a form of quiet resistance, a way to insist on visibility and value in a society determined to erase both. In these photos, style is not just personal, it is political, a visual economy of pride that moved through the streets and into the pages of history. North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance opened its doors in Durham in 1898, offering policies to Black families denied coverage by white-owned firms. By the 1950s, it had become the largest Black-owned insurance company in the country, with over $40 million in assets and more than 600,000 policies in force. Agents in pressed suits traveled door to door, collecting premiums and delivering not just insurance, but dignity, guaranteeing that a family's savings would not vanish with a funeral or illness. The company headquarters became a landmark on Paris Street, known as Black Wall Street, and its profits funded scholarships, home loans, and even legal challenges against segregation. Across the country, fraternal orders like the Prince Hall Masons and the Improved Benevolent Protective Order of Elks held processions in full regalia, their banners bright against city streets. Lodges hosted scholarship banquets, sick aid funds, and job placement programs. In 1963 alone, Prince Hall lodges awarded thousands of dollars in college aid and quietly paid bail for jailed activists. Black-owned savings and loan associations and credit unions, often operating from church basements or storefronts, offered small business loans and mortgages when white banks refused. These mutual aid networks formed a quiet backbone for the movement, underwriting everything from voter registration drives to emergency relief after violence. The archives at Duke and North Carolina Central University preserve photographs of insurance agents at their desks, lodge members in sashes, and group portraits outside credit unions. Each image is a record of how Black communities pooled risk and resources, building safety nets in a world that offered few. These institutions did not just provide financial services, they created a platform for activism, education, and stability, giving people the means to resist and the confidence to plan for tomorrow. Printing presses thundered through the night on Chicago's South Side, rolling out the latest edition of The Defender. In the early 20th century, and especially during the civil rights years, the Black press set the agenda for a nation within a nation. The Chicago Defender, founded in 1905, shipped hundreds of thousands of copies across the country each week. Its headlines called for boycotts, tracked lynching cases, and spotlighted the everyday victories and losses of Black Americans. At its height, the Defender's circulation topped 250,000, reaching readers as far as Mississippi and Alabama, where local white papers refused to cover Black news. The Pittsburgh Courier, another giant, ran national campaigns for voting rights and jobs, sending reporters to cover everything from school integration to the latest Supreme Court decision. But the press did more than report, it mobilized. In 1956, when Black citizens in Tallahassee launched a bus boycott, the Defender's front page urged readers to send money and supplies. Editors published lists of businesses to support or avoid, turning newspapers into blueprints for protests. The Black press also documented the movement's most harrowing moments. In 1955, Jet magazine published the open casket photo of Emmett Till, a 14-year-old lynched in Mississippi. The decision to print that image, against the advice of advertisers and some staff, forced the country to confront the violence Black families faced. That single photo, seen by millions, is often credited with helping launch the modern civil rights movement. In newsrooms from Chicago to Pittsburgh, editors weighed every word, knowing that a headline could spark a march or draw the attention of federal investigators. Reporters risked arrest, violence, and economic retaliation to get the story. Their archives, preserved in places like the Chicago Public Library and the Johnson Publishing Records, are more than a record. They are a living memory of struggle and triumph. The Black press built a communication network that kept neighborhoods informed, activists connected, and a movement alive. On any given weeknight in Birmingham, the 16th Street Baptist Church stood as more than a house of worship. It was a nerve center, pews packed shoulder to shoulder for mass meetings, the air thick with resolve and gospel hymns. The church's basement doubled as a planning room where volunteers sorted flyers and strategized marches. In the early 1960s, Birmingham's churches hosted hundreds of these gatherings, each one a lifeline for the movement. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC pastors, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth among them, used the pulpit to call neighbors to action, weaving scripture with calls for justice. From these sanctuaries, congregants pooled money for bail and travel, sometimes raising several $1,000s in a single week to support arrested protesters and voter registration drives. The 16th Street Baptist Church, after suffering a deadly bombing in 1963, became a national symbol of both loss and determination. The tragedy drew mourners from across the country, but it also spurred a surge of organizing. In the weeks that followed, church halls filled again, not just for prayer, but for training in nonviolence, for distributing food and clothing, for legal aid sessions. Church records and SCLC minutes from the era show how faith leaders coordinated rides, set up phone trees, and kept watch for police raids. Across the South, Black churches functioned as the connective tissue of the movement. They offered not just spiritual comfort, but physical space, trusted leadership, and a deep sense of belonging. Fundraising totals from church-based campaigns ran into the tens of thousands, money that fueled everything from mass meetings to Freedom Summer classrooms. The beauty in these photos is not just in stained glass or Sunday hats, but in the faces of people who turned faith into action, transforming their sanctuaries into engines of change. Family albums tell stories that rarely made the headlines. In the years when legal segregation shaped every public space, Black families gathered in living rooms, backyards, and church halls to mark life's milestones with ceremony and pride. Wedding portraits from the Schomburg collection show couples standing tall in lace and linen, surrounded by siblings, parents, and neighbors, every face a witness to hope. Graduation photos, especially after the GI Bill opened college doors to more Black veterans and their children, became treasured keepsakes. Rows of fresh-pressed caps and gowns, sometimes in front yards or on church steps, signaled both personal achievement and a family's investment in the future. Rituals stretched beyond the formal. On Juneteenth, communities paraded through city streets or gathered in local parks, honoring freedom with music, food, and laughter. Backyard cookouts, Sunday suppers, and porch gatherings became regular rituals where stories, recipes, and lessons passed from elders to the young. Even in neighborhoods boxed in by redlining or restrictive covenants, these celebrations built a sense of belonging that outlasted any city ordinance. The value of these rituals went deeper than tradition. Each photograph, whether a birthday party at home or a Juneteenth parade banner, documents how families created stability and joy under pressure. The ability to pass down values, support, and ambition from one generation to the next stands as a quiet triumph of the civil rights era. These moments, preserved in family albums and community archives, remind us that the fight for equality was also a fight to protect everyday beauty and the bonds that hold people together. Atlanta Life Insurance Company opened its offices on Auburn Avenue in 1905, offering Black families the chance to build wealth and security in a world that often refused them both. By the 1960s, Atlanta Life had become one of the largest Black-owned insurers in the country, employing hundreds and holding millions in assets. Their ledgers show how premiums collected door-to-door were recycled back into home loans, scholarships, and emergency aid, all within the community. In Los Angeles, Golden State Mutual Life Insurance grew into a West Coast powerhouse, with corporate records at UCLA revealing not just financial growth, but a deliberate investment in Black art and culture, including murals, photographs, and community events that turned an office into a neighborhood landmark. Barbershops and beauty salons lined the business corridors of cities like Chicago, Detroit, and Birmingham. These were more than places for a trim or a press. They were information centers, campaign headquarters, and safe havens where boycotts were planned and news traveled fast. Oral histories describe how barbers and beauticians kept cash flowing even during hard times, using their shops to sell tickets for benefit concerts and collect dues for mutual aid societies. Restaurants and pharmacies on Sweet Auburn or Birmingham's 4th Avenue offered jobs and a place to gather, often serving as the only public accommodations where Black customers could eat or shop with dignity before the Civil Rights Act of 1964 outlawed discrimination in such spaces. When consumer boycotts swept through cities, cash that once flowed to white-owned stores was redirected to Black businesses, fueling a parallel economy. Employment rose as insurance firms, salons, and shops hired clerks, agents, cooks, and janitors from the neighborhood. These businesses were not just economic engines, they were platforms for activism and pride, laying the groundwork for the bustling corridors that would define Black urban life. On Auburn Avenue in Atlanta, the sidewalks once buzzed with life from sunrise to midnight. This was Sweet Auburn, the stretch that Fortune magazine dubbed the richest Negro street in the world. Block after block, Black-owned banks, insurance companies, beauty shops, and funeral homes stood shoulder to shoulder with churches and social clubs. The Auburn Avenue Research Library preserves photos of these storefronts, window signs advertising home loans, parades passing Big Bethel AME, and crowds spilling out after Sunday service. In the 1940s and the 1950s, more than 150 Black-owned businesses operated on just a few city blocks. Chicago's Bronzeville told a similar story. Along South State Street, the neighborhood pulsed with commerce, grocery stores, record shops, the offices of the Chicago Defender, and the Regal Theater's bright marquee. The Chicago History Museum's images captured dense crowds on the sidewalk, shopkeepers in pressed shirts, and children in Sunday best. These corridors were not just economic engines, they served as meeting places, news hubs, and launching pads for civic leaders. Lawyers, pastors, and organizers often kept offices above the shops, making it easy to turn a lunchtime conversation into a campaign for better schools or fairer city services. These neighborhoods thrived not because segregation was kind, but because Black families built their own institutions after being shut out of white downtowns. Civil rights organizing forced city officials to expand public services and later small business lending in places they had long ignored. The density of businesses and institutions on Auburn and in Bronzeville created a pipeline of leadership, feeding students and future professionals into nearby historically Black colleges and universities, and laying the groundwork for the next wave of Black excellence. On the red brick campuses of Howard, Morehouse, Spelman, and Tuskegee, generations of Black students gathered in lecture halls, dorm rooms, and chapel basements, sharpening their minds for battles beyond the classroom. These weren't just colleges. They were engines of legal training, debate, and organizing, where a student's cap and gown often led straight to the front lines of the movement. At Howard University's law school, professors like Charles Hamilton Houston mentored a new wave of legal thinkers, including Thurgood Marshall, who would help dismantle school segregation through cases such as Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. The Moreland Spingarn Research Center preserves photos of these students in study circles and courtrooms, their books marked with handwritten notes for the next brief or protest. On campuses across the South, the energy was electric. Morehouse and Spelman students marched from the Quad to City Hall, demanding fair hiring and desegregated lunch counters. At Tuskegee, students trained for careers in science and teaching while organizing voter registration drives in Alabama's Black Belt. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC, found many of its earliest leaders on HBCU campuses, including John Lewis at Fisk and Diane Nash at Howard. Yearbook pages and protest snapshots from the SNCC Digital Gateway show students in pressed shirts, holding signs, sometimes facing police lines just blocks from their dorms. These institutions produced not only lawyers and activists, but a leadership pipeline that would feed city councils, school boards, and eventually Congress. Graduation rates at historically Black colleges and universities soared through the 1950s and the 1960s, with thousands earning degrees each year, even as public funding lagged behind white schools. The combination of rigorous academics, community pride, and political training made HBCU campuses a launchpad for the legal victories and grassroots organizing that defined the civil rights era. Each diploma was more than a credential, it was a tool for change, passed from campus to courtroom, from classroom to city hall. In the summer of 1964, volunteers and local residents in Mississippi gathered on church steps and in school basements, filling out voter registration forms under the watchful eyes of federal observers. Freedom. Summer brought thousands into the movement, and for the first time, Black citizens in the Deep South began to see their names added to the rolls in meaningful numbers. Just a year later, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 swept away literacy tests and poll taxes, sending Black registration in states like Mississippi from barely 6% in 1964 to nearly 60% by 1968. Selma's marches, captured in rare photos of battered feet and determined faces crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, forced the nation to reckon with the price of democracy denied. The impact was immediate and profound. By the early 1970s, more than 1 million new Black voters had joined the rolls across the South. This new political power transformed city halls. In 1967, Richard Hatcher and Gary and Carl Stokes in Cleveland became the first Black mayors of major American cities. Maynard Jackson's election as Atlanta's mayor in 1973 opened the door to city contracts and jobs for Black Atlantans on a scale never seen before. Under Jackson, minority-owned firms went from less than 1% to about a third of all city contracts, tens of millions of dollars flowing into Black businesses and neighborhoods. These victories were not just symbolic. They meant real budgets, new schools, better roads, and public jobs for communities long shut out of power. The right to vote, finally protected by law, became the lever that moved the entire system, turning decades of organizing and sacrifice into lasting change. Across all 10 entries, one pattern stands out. Beauty became a form of resistance. Even under legal oppression, Black communities built power, pride, and lasting institutions. These gains are not relics. They are living proof that culture and unity can outlast injustice. The Civil Rights era's true legacy is the strength to create beauty where others saw only barriers. What legacy do you see in these images? Share your thoughts below.